Versatile Mage. Chapter 614. The Dead Street. It was a fairly spacious street, with shops, shopping malls, office buildings, and structures along the way. However, there were not many alleyways on the sides, while the main path toward the Yuan gate was occupied by the undead. It went without saying that the street would have the highest number of civilians, thus the majority of the undead headed straight for it. As a result, the whole street was basically filled with undead. On top of that, a flesh-mound corpse official the size of a building was sitting right in the middle of the street, like a mountain of flesh. Even magicians would have a hard time trying to pass it. Mo Fan and his crew were not afraid of facing a crowd of zombies. They could easily handle warrior-level undead too, but in the case of the flesh-mound corpse official, they would still die even if they were given 10,000 lives. They carefully approached the street and discovered that the whole place was indeed crawling with all kinds of skeletons, zombies, and phantoms. Most terrifyingly, there were quite a few corpse generals and skeleton generals among them. The street was stained with blood, with dead bodies spread across the place. It was simply a scene of the apocalypse. "This is nothing but a dead street," said Shorty, up on the balcony of a building, with a trembling voice. Glancing down from above, they could see people who were totally unaware of the situation making their way toward the street. Even magicians would not be able to survive after running into the undead, let alone civilians. "There are too many of them. It will be hard for us to make our way through with just the few of us," Bai pointed out. "It's possible that there are other magicians nearby. We can find them and team up. Otherwise, we're all going to die here," said Shorty. Mo Fan nodded. The undead on the street were too dense. It would be a tough fight trying to make their way through. Their biggest problem was the flesh-mound corpse official. Once they caught its attention, they would all die here. "I'll go and look for people." Shorty was decisive in situations like this. He quickly vanished from the group. "I'll take a look at the situation ahead. Bai, Zhou Ming, you two stay here to protect them," said Mo Fan, who did not want to wait there and do nothing. There were civilians in the group. It was not reasonable to simply barge their way through. They would have to clear a path so the people of Bo City Street could make it to the other end safely. "All right, be careful," said Zhou Ming. Mo Fan was already gone when his words were still echoing through the building they were hiding in. It was extremely easy for Mo Fan to move around in an area with many buildings like this. He could move freely as long as there were shadows. The overlapping shadows of the buildings and the blind corners served as stepping stones for Mo Fan, allowing him to move forward freely. Mo Fan jumped down from a balcony, holding onto the iron bars of a window, before propelling himself to another balcony on a shorter building. The balcony was in the dark as the tall office building beside it had blocked off the sunlight. Mo Fan's figure sank into the shadows like falling into water as he arrived on the balcony. He went missing for a few seconds. Not long after, Mo Fan appeared from the other side of the balcony. His eyes were observing the dead street only a building away. Mo Fan lowered his eyes and glanced at the alleyway drenched in rain. He fell freely from the balcony and landed on the umbrella outside of a coffee shop. Mo Fan utilized the bounce of the umbrella to land safely on the ground. To his surprise, he saw a phantom under the umbrella when he turned around. The phantom had horns on its head, with a pointy, long jaw. Fangs poked out from its mouth like a boar, and its face was entirely red. It was roaming aimlessly in the area when a human fell from the sky after the umbrella shuddered for a moment. The phantom stared right into Mo Fan's eyes, with a blossoming lust rising in it. "Lightning strike." The phantom uttered a weird cry and lunged at Mo Fan. Mo Fan nimbly hopped aside, dodging the pounce, and fired lightning from his palm. The lightning arcs cracked loudly as they crawled over the phantom. The shock from the lightning arcs scorched the skin of the phantom and left it twitching on the ground, as if it were performing a fascinating dance of electricity. Mo Fan's lightning strike was quite powerful. Meanwhile, the phantom turned out to be fairly weak. The lightning arcs took its life as soon as they penetrated the creature's body. A small soul remnant floated into the little loach pendant. It's dead already. Mo Fan was quite surprised, but he did not overthink it. The building ahead was the only thing between him and the dead street. There was a coffee shop right behind the building. Mo Fan simply hid inside the coffee shop and slowly made his way forward to check out the situation on the dead street. After passing the coffee shop, Mo Fan arrived in a huge hall. There were a few skeletons roaming aimlessly inside the hall. Mo Fan did not engage, turning into a shadow sweeping across the ceiling to pass them by. Further ahead was the dead street. The windows of the shop facing the street were smashed, leaving glass scattered across the floor. Inside the shop was the corpse of a man whose face was bitten beyond recognition. Judging from his clothes, he was most likely the worker in the shop. A few mannequins were knocked down in the display corner. Mo Fan hid behind the mannequins. The fleeing shadow allowed him to merge with the dim background and conceal his presence. The low-ranked undead would not be able to discover his presence for a while. Outside the window was the dead street. The place was slightly wider than Mo Fan first observed from the balcony. He could not cross the street with fleeing shadow even if he wanted to. At a rough glance, there were more than 200 zombies, skeletons, and phantoms, with 3 to 4 warrior-level undead nearby. Even a group of elite intermediate magicians would have a hard time clearing a path. There was nothing he could do. The place where the Fleshmound Corps official landed would be crawling with undead. Mo Fan could only hope that Shorty managed to find some reliable magicians. They would only have a chance of crossing the street by working together. Mo Fan checked his surroundings and discovered a cross-section with less undead. It turned out to be a zebra crossing. After the zebra crossing was a narrow pedestrian walk. If the group could somehow make it to the pedestrian walk, the undead chasing them from behind would be restricted by the buildings on both sides, helping the group escape. A magician that can fly. Mo Fan was about to leave when he saw a magician in a purple outfit standing on the restaurant opposite the shop he was in. Wind wings were rotating behind the man's back. Even though the wings were not beating, the air surrounding the man was spinning rapidly. The man in the purple outfit seemed to have come here to observe the situation too. His gaze crossed the street and locked onto Mo Fan, who was disguising himself as a mannequin. "How many people do you have, Shadow Magician?" The man's voice suddenly came from across the street. It was so clear to Mo Fan that it felt like the man was talking right beside him. Mo Fan was startled, before recalling that Xinxia had used the same method to talk to him before. Chapter end. Please guys like, comment, share, and subscribe.